Okay, yeah, thank you. I'm really excited for tonight's presentation. Welcome everybody to the start of our spring speaker series. I'm really pleased to be introducing Dr. Kim Chacon tonight for an exciting presentation about landscaping design for native bees. Kim has a BS in landscape architecture, an MS with the geography graduate group, and is awaiting the imminent completion of a PhD also with the geography graduate group, all from UC Davis. So very exciting on that front. She's currently a lecturer at Cal Poly's Landscape Architecture Department and is working on a really fun side project to expand a free pollinator seed library project, which I'm a huge fan of. And that's aimed at increasing the availability of forage for bees and other wildlife in suburban areas. She loves working with native bees in particular, as they are often overlooked despite the important pollinator and ecosystem services that they provide. I really couldn't agree more. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over and give a warm welcome to Kim. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, thanks you for joining me, everyone. I'm always happy to talk to whoever will listen about bees. And like Kristen said, I am finishing my dissertation at UC Davis. I'm like almost done with that. And then I have been teaching at Cal Poly for just over a year. And that has been really, really fun. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background about my dissertation project, and then I'm going to show you what I've been able to do with Cal Poly students and my dreams for ecological design for bees. So just to give you a quick background, I know you guys are plant people. I started as a plant person, and now I've ventured off into the fauna that need these plants. And I have some pictures throughout. I tried to label them with the bee genus and the plant genus as well, so you can get to know them. For designing for native bees, it's a complicated topic. It took a long time to get through this dissertation. So I'll show you what I've learned. Long story short, I did a project where I ended up mapping bee habitat usage within the UC Davis Arboretum, and I did that over a course of a year to test what they were feeding. And I ended up with a whole bunch of pictures, which is really fun. That was part of my collected data. But just so you guys can get to know the bees, since you are the plant folks, there are many, many thousands of different types of bees in this world. 20,000, over 20,000 to be exact. In North America, we have close to 4,000, about half of which are found in California. So we have, just like we have a very plant diverse state, we also have a bee very high richness as well. I did my research in Davis, so I had estimates there for Davis, but it's probably more so in San Luis Obispo because it's less built up and the temperatures are more, moderate. As you can see, bees look a lot different. They are different sizes, they have different hairs, they are different colors. There is a massive amount of diversity with bees. This is a wonderful poster, which you can get at this website if you're really interested. These are some of the selected research pictures of bees that were actually seen in Davis. So in case you're curious what they actually look like in real life, these are images from my research. Some of the best ones I feel like are the Deodasia bees, which they just turned out lovely, the photos. Cactus bees. We have Melissoides that has very long antennae. Soon we'll probably see Xylocopa, the carpenter bees. Osmia, Megachile has these wonderful hairs underneath the belly. Agapostum, the green bees, they're out for quite a long time around here as well. If you grow your own squash and vegetables, you've probably seen squash bees, the Pepinapis as well. And there are even more. But I just wanted to show you, these are just some of the images from my research in Davis, what these bees look like in Davis. Actual bees in SLO. So for the last year, I've been getting more acquainted with the area, despite the pandemic and everything that entailed. By the way, welcome to my teaching office / stage. I don't know. That's how I started, was just online 1 year ago. So anyway, at least it's a nice place to be. If you are interested in connecting online about native bees, I use iNaturalist, and Resilient Bees is my username, so you could follow me. And I ended up meeting, so I got into this by meeting Cindy Rossler, who's in the meeting. She's your secretary, as I understand, and she has an iNaturalist account called Dipper Ranch, or Dippy Ranch, and she also has a photo log of bees in Los Osos. So they may even differ. I know they do actually differ a bit from what I have found so far. I'm over in Grover Beach. I go over to Orcutt Community Park sometimes, and this is part of the diversity that I have seen so far. I've seen some bees that I never saw in Davis, which is really neat. So for example, this Perdita is a very small bee. This is on a California poppy, so you can see how small it is. This green bee on the left, we have an, let's see, Hagochoria, which is really neat. I've seen, sorry, I have to work with my monitor here. Anthophora urbana, which is a common, somewhat common urban bee, which is more in the summertime. Saw a very fuzzy Andrena, which I accidentally watered it, so I caught it here and it helped it dry off before I let it go. But I got a picture first, of course. We have Andrena, very small ones, on some gazania in the Orcutt Community Park. And someone sent me a picture of this bombas, which is one that I have never seen before. And it's either Californica or Crotchii. So far, the verdict is out. So yes, that is a great start here for what I've seen in this area. Now, what have I seen so far in SLO? I have seen things from the Apidae family so far. I've seen Apis mellifera, which has been quite active since even the first of the year. I have seen the first bumblebees I saw come out on the lower right-hand corner here, and they are Bombus vosnesenskyii. And right now you've probably seen in your gardens and around the very large, about over an inch long queens are out right now looking for corridors or little holes in the ground to make into their nests. We also have, I've seen Bombus melanopagus, which is one of the first bumblebees, usually, if not the first one to come out. They do okay in the cold, and so that's typical. And then interestingly enough, I don't have an actual picture yet, so I used one from the poster on the SLO on Cal Poly's campus. When I went out with my students, we went on a bee hunt, just to look at them, and ended up coming across an Anthophora that's very dark colored like this. And I collected it, and I'm in the process of pinning it and letting it dry, but then I'll be able to have an actual picture of that one. But I was shocked that we actually found an Anthophora at this time of year on campus. So that was really neat. Why bees? Bees are the most efficient and therefore important group of pollinators. We depend on them for our food. It depends on the source, but either 1/3 to 2/3 of all of the food that we eat, like of every bite, is pollinated by bees specifically. So if you like a diversity of food, which I'm sure you do, then you like bees, okay? Now the picture, this is a picture of a European honeybee, but there are so many different kinds, and we depend on European honeybees. They're almost managed like a livestock in the US, but we also do depend on the native ones. Interestingly enough, I'm sure you guys have heard about habitat fragmentation being a problem for other animals, and bees are no exception. They are having problems because of the amount of development that's been going on. So to stabilize ecosystem services, so that means things that the environment provides to humans for free, we need to help stabilize the environment for bees and their habitat. Just to get a sense of, there's so many different types of bees, what are their characteristics? There are 17 bee genera that are commonly found in California, of which most of them live in the ground. Okay, so these are, you think of honeybees, and that's like the norm that we think of, right? But that's actually not the normal ones. Honeybees are actually the weird ones. Most bees live in the ground. Most bees live on a diet which is well, ones that can do okay in urban areas, have a diet that is somewhat generalist, okay? And you can see the difference here. And then the ranges. So the females are tethered to the nest. The females are the ones that go out, get pollen preserves, and bring them back to the young, to the eggs that they've laid, that they put pollen ball in each cell so that those eggs can develop and grow over and make the next generation. And so females are tied to these nests, and they have different ranges. The research has shown that the body size correlates to how far the bees can travel. So very small bodied bees can only go, you know, let's see, what is it? Sorry, my screen blocks the other screen. I just improved this. Very small traveling bees only go about a tenth of a mile. The highest traveling bees, so like European honeybees, again, they are the exception. They can go up to 2 miles. Other moderately long traveling ones, Xylocopa and Bombus, bumblebees, can go about a mile max from their nests. And most everybody else is in these, you know, half a mile, a quarter of a mile sort of ranges. So it's not so much. I just want to give you an example of my research background, just so you can get an idea of the context for this and what I've learned and how I'm applying it. And I've put in some images from my research. My idea started, this whole thing started with, how do I make the best pollinator garden possible? And then I realized in my senior year in landscape architecture at Davis, it's not just about the singular garden. That's not good enough. It has to be networks. And how do I do that? And so it started me on this wormhole, this big project, which took a lot of thinking and was actually very complicated because of how many different types of bees there are. And how do I design for all of them? So it became interesting. This is the very technical stuff, which we don't have to get into all that today. But I just wanted to give you guys kind of the background on that. I ended up making a mapping model of the Arboretum. We tested against the literature that was published for bee visitation for foraging, and then we looked at how it actually worked out, and we looked at if we could actually define where habitat fragmentation was occurring with GIS, and that had never been done before. And then I'm really interested in actually applying my knowledge. So, you know, what do we do with this knowledge? How do I still best design for bees? Well, I developed some very some interesting ideas about that over the last decade. So we'll get there, okay? But just to start off, like my research pulls on a lot of themes. If you are interested in the science, if you want to read about landscape ecology, or maybe you already had, that is definitely where my research like resides. It's all about actually applying ecology. It's an applied science approach. So results. Native plants are great for bees, but that's not quite the whole story, okay? Don't bring out all your pitchforks quite yet though. Just so you know, bees have their own seasonality. So this was over the course of the year. You can see how the peak visitation of bees occurs like end of May, probably beginning of June in Davis. We may have something a little bit slower here because the temperatures don't peak up so high here. But just so you know, the bees do have this annual cycle that mirrors a lot of the plants as well. These are the bee genera that I did find in Davis. The ones with asterisks were rarely seen. So, you know, all of the other ones were much more commonly seen. And I will give you, there will be another slide which shows kind of more the correlation between them, okay? And not all gardens were the same. So one of the interesting things about doing my research in the UC Davis Arboretum is that the gardens are themed. There's actually, I think it's 34 themed gardens within the one arboretum, and they're all mapped. I had a lab mate who got to do that project. They're all mapped, GIS and everything. And it created this interesting kind of situation where we could test each individual garden and its ability to support bees ecologically. And it was very different in how the various gardens worked. we didn't know exactly how it was. I know you guys cannot read all of these lines, and that is fine. I'm going to show you the most important part of this on the next slide. But as you can see, do you see how there's a bunch of them bunched at the bottom, and then there's two that peak above? We're going to look at the two that peak above. Well, there are two that were way above the other ones. And the first one is the blue line, which is the Mary Wattis Brown Garden. It's a California native garden. Yay, go natives, supporting native bees. That is great news. But wait, what's going on with that red line? That was an interesting question. And it turns out that the UC Davis Arboretum has a program for, they call them the Arboretum All-Stars, and it's a mix of native plants and also Mediterranean, usually drought-tolerant plants, which they've selected over the years. They did some trials and stuff like that. So they're selected to be drought-tolerant and beautiful year-round and hardly get any water in the summer, despite the brutal Davis summers. So what we're seeing here is that the native plants are providing peak habitat in May. And what we're seeing is that the store gardens, the non-native, some of them are non-native, some of them aren't, and they are peaking later, like in August, and bees are still going there. So those bees that are later season bees are using the Ruth Storer garden. Characteristics of these gardens: Mary Wattis Brown is California native, of course, is drought tolerant, right? Part of the original ecosystems locally. And the Ruth Storer garden is different, but they have long, often those plants have, I was looking at the bloom times, they often have long bloom times, which the bees find appealing as well as us, which was a good coincidence. But the geographic source is variable. So that was interesting, okay? Now, I know you can't read this, but the next slide you'll be able to read. I just wanted to show you that, so I collected 7,788 data points throughout this year. It was a big, long data collection slog. Some of the plant genera were way better than others in terms of their success for feeding bees. So let's look at, I just wanted to show you, see how high the first one is there? That's salvia. And you can see it had 589 data points. And the next lowest one, the next one, second place is 307. So you can see it's a massive step. I just wanted to show you that big scoop there. So here it is in table form, so you can actually read it. Just doesn't look as impressive. And these are the best plants for all bees. So this includes European honeybees. I know you guys are keen on the natives, and that is a good thing. But I have to say, I think European honeybees are naturalized here. I don't think they're going to go away. They're having some issues with their populations, that's for sure, but they've naturalized. So it's an interesting status. They're kind of like an agricultural tool for us, but they're also like an invasive, but they're just naturalized. They're here to stay. I think they're not going to go anywhere. Anyway, you can see how incredible salvia was. Eriogonum, Eschscholzia, rosemary, gaillardia, excellent plants. Okay. Now, this includes those honeybees though. What if we just want to be purists and we just want to see what those native bees have? Okay, well, here's just the native bees and what they want. So they are still using a huge proportion of that salvia. Oh my gosh. So it's a lot of the same plants. It's just it's a pretty large proportion of the same plants, but these are what the native bees were foraging on. The numbers are how many visits over the year per garden, per bee and flower association. You don't have to worry about it too much, but because it gets complicated to think about. But the higher the number, the more popular that plant was with more types of bees. Okay. Many of them are native, not all of them are though, and that's interesting. And what bees would probably like more research on is which plants are drought tolerant and can feed them even if we don't have water. Okay, you guys, I feel like I preach to the choir though. You guys are all about the native bees. I love this program you guys have, the Bloom California. What a great website that I found, and you guys are great. And I think overall, I mean, I'm not a bee. I know I have the knowledge more than a bee does.
Yeah.
Native bees are holistic in their lifestyles. You know, they every year they have an annual life cycle, they biodegrade, and same with the annual plants. They have lived in these ecosystems for millions of years, most of them, and it's like a zero waste, most efficient organism that you just can't replace. So, you know, holistically, I think the natives are better. Okay. So just so you know, this project turned into a mapping thing, so which was really important about this. So I ended up, the entire arboretum is mapped, every single plant, which is incredible. And it was a chance to test these. So for example, I tested where, so the gray is where Eucera should have been based on where the plant location is and Eucera's range. And then the hatch is where we actually saw, where I actually saw Eucera. And so you can see sometimes there's a gap in there, okay? This is the entire arboretum mapped out and its outline. And then that wasn't enough. Then I was like, you know what? These gaps can occur over months. And so I wanted to make sure that I was looking at the data throughout months of the year to make sure that I was identifying any gaps in time as well. So we're looking at spatial, but also temporal habitat analysis. And then once you do define a gap, it's important to strategically plant things where they should be. Okay, so this gets back to the beginning of my thesis. It's not just good enough to have a random garden here, a random garden there. You have to fill in the gaps. Otherwise, the bees can't get from place to place. Okay, and we all know habitat fragmentation is a really bad problem for animals. So I developed this list of designs. You know, what if I could design the ultimate bee garden, the ultimate network, how would I do it? And I came up with this list. So I think design should reduce spatial and temporal bottlenecks. Okay, we should increase the diversity of pollinators in the landscape. So not just designing for European honeybees. A lot of the stuff that's published or is on social media is just for honeybees, which is really a shame. And we really need to increase the quality of floral resources. How to do it, I think, is still being uncovered, okay? But I can give you what I've learned so far. Number two, design should have a message. They should deliver a message so that it's clever, so it's attractive, so that the public doesn't just look at that field and think, oh, look at that ugly field of weeds. There needs to be some type of interface to help people have like more landscape literacy about what they're looking at. I think that design should be local in nature. I mean, that probably goes without saying, but whatever I decide, for example, for bees in California, it's not necessarily the same in a different estate or even a different county for that matter. I think there's a lot of opportunity for exploring and like celebrating the differences among pollinators. So this is like a massive opportunity. So I'm going to go quickly through this next part so I can finish in time, but just to give you an idea, a lot of my research is based on kind of some ideas about the future of ecological design. I consider myself to be part of an urban design realm, or urban ecology, which is a newer emerging field. Like within the last 5 years, it's become a lot more popular. And one thing that I think that's really important, I saw this great stamp where, you know, teaching children about caterpillars, having access to nature, in other words, is just as important for the caterpillar or the nature as it is for the child. So, you know, keeping that into consideration. If people don't know about it, they won't value it. So I feel that there's a lot of kind of gap between what we know now versus what we need people to know. So let's see. There's a lot of environmental problems. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. You guys are already cued in CNPS. I would say the biggest ones right now are habitat loss and fragmentation. If you look at any species right now, like any animal species description of what's wrong with them, their population, it will list habitat loss and fragmentation. And yet for bees, there is not like a set of instructions on how to go about fixing that. And I found that as a designer incredibly maddening. So I kind of made it my mission to help fix that. Climate change is a major issue. We're going to have species going northward, well, poleward, and up in elevation. Big problems. We'll see what happens in the coming years. Loss of pollinators. Pollinators are keystone species, and they provide food for us, but they also keep our ecosystems running. They keep those feedback loops going. The more they pollinate, they feed all of the other animals that depend on those fruits, berries, nuts, anything. Vegetation. I think in general, I put on there lack of ethics. In my class, I talk about this. It's a little bit different. It's we talk about tragedy of the commons. If you don't know about that, I don't want to spend the time right now, but it's your own personal gain versus like sharing with the others is a big theme. I think even in today's people's lives. There's a lot of other things, but we'll stick with those for tonight. Landscape ecology and urban ecology can be applied everywhere, which is really exciting. So I came across this design. So for example, if you have this range from urban to rural, kind of a gradient, right? Landscape gradient. And then what if we planted more trees? What would be the good outcomes? And so this is the difference between a 2020 projection and 2070, like an optimistic, like, oh yes, those trees grew, the vegetation grew. I mean, look at the percentage of change. And there's people studying this every day with GIS in different scenarios, but I think specifically with bees, we could add bee plants anywhere. We could tuck them in urban neighborhoods, office parks, cul-de-sacs, cultivated land, rural space, parks and recreation, streets, roads. People have ideas for like along power lines and that sort of thing. There's a lot of possibility. Recently, I read a book called Rambunctious Garden by Emma Maris. And I have to say she's pretty inspiring. She's since had another book called Wild Souls, which is also excellent. And it's about kind of meshing together kind of the mess of ecology right now and also the deficiencies of urban ecology with how to handle them into the future. And I found it to be pretty inspiring. I don't know if any of you have read it, but it's cool. The other thing that I think is really smart is that we should aim for creating resilient systems as much as possible. So plants that don't require much water, plants that will biodegrade, will be carbon neutral. We could think about it like that. And we'll be able to do okay with the future forecast of increased temperatures and then the changes in precipitation, depending on what those are. So dealing with habitat fragmentation, as a designer, we have a toolkit for designing corridors, which have been, become a big, there's been a big emphasis on them, like in the past, 11, 12 years. So there's kind of rules though. You want to try to have, so we have this diagram with the top and the bottom here, and that your goal is to create a bunch of stepping stones to get from one habitat patch to the other. That way, if you lose a stepping stone, like you still have connectivity because you have circuitry in other ways to get from the northern part there to the top of the page. There's some technical stuff in there that doesn't matter for you guys, but we should try to conserve open space, okay, and create connectivity between. Keep in mind, and these are for more charismatic animals, such as the elk, and I have an otter on there. Each species has its own corridor that it would prefer. So you can see in this drawing that this is a landscape. And if you were to design it to maximize it for the elk, it's going to look a lot different than if you maximize it for the otter. And what's interesting about the bees is that there is such a big diversity of them that you could actually think like this about bees. Like if you design a landscape really, really well for Deodasia, it may not work well for Serratina, for example. So where's the compromise? That's what that comes down to. Amongst all, the other rule for ecological design is that to design for a species, you need to provide feeding resources. You need to provide any resources for reproduction that they may need, and you need to provide resources for cover, which is like housing or nesting. And without the three of those, you're not going to really be able to provide habitat, okay? So sometimes change can be hard. Now I'm on your I'm on the CNPS Facebook page, and I just came across this over summer, and it just, oh. In today's world, we still meet a lot of resistance, right, for planting natives from some people. And this is just an example of a current thing that I saw, like in real life. Probably you guys saw it too, about people complaining about the aesthetics, not understanding the ecology and like the good parts of it. So that is kind of an uphill thing, you guys have noticed. But my goodness, the more pictures we put out there about how beautiful a landscape, a native landscape can be, and it is such good habitat too, so much better than just grass. So I'm preaching to the choir on that. Where you might want to get out your pitchfork is the topic of reconciliation ecology. So, going forward, can I only design for natives? This climate's going to be different than it was in the past. So I think we're going to have to compromise between what happened in the past versus how we're going to go forward. And if we were a bee today, and we were looking at those plant choices, the bee would vote probably like that too. But I'm just studying bees. I don't study the whole ecosystem. Keep in mind that landscapes are dynamic, that they change, and that these changes affect, succession, fire affects bees as well. It's really interesting. That's still being studied right now. Okay. So we need to design for resiliency across a lot of space, across time. These are some interesting landscape architecture projects, but if you want, we can talk about them at the end, but not important for now. These are my inspiration, past and present. So, Ian McHarg is one of the first landscape architects who worked with, he had a book called Design with Nature. My professor always says, but how? He didn't say how. And so that's really what's been researched in the past, since the 80s, is we've gotten really good at it. And more recently, I would say Kate Orff is like my ultimate role model. She designed this huge project for oysters. She is like, for me, I'm bees, she's oysters, and she's really into oysters. It's amazing, her project. So those are probably my favorite ones. And I use GIS, so it's a great tool to be able to use. Just to give you kind of an overview, there are more people living in cities now than than in recent history. So for a long time, we were in cities, then we went more rural in the US, and now we're more urban again. And so there's an increased emphasis on improving urban areas, since that'll improve most people's lives. So designing for bees, I'm going to remind you, we're going to reduce spatial bottlenecks, temporal bottlenecks, we're going to deliver a message, we're going to be sensitive to local conditions, and we're going to do it artistically and celebrate what's amazing about bees. So here is, this class is a class where I give them 10 assignments. They have 3 days to do each assignment. So these assignments are fast, and I'll show you some of them. We start off, they have to learn the plants and the bees. So we start off making images to promote which plants are good for bees based on science, based on what is in the, I have the sources at the end, I'll show you, and my own research, okay? We have some amazing talent in this department, let me tell you. Cal Poly, I don't know if you guys can see, but this student actually wrote the plant names and the stems of the flowers. Oh, what a great idea. Keep in mind, for each of these projects, they only had 3 days. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty impressed with what they can do, okay? I want them to make images which demonstrate what is actually good for bees. I try to be flexible about the media that they use, if they want to do it by hand or on the computer, but I'm making sure that they don't just design for European honeybees, that they broaden their range a bit. This one actually printed off shirts to sell. Awesome. Very accurate, very talented. Okay, this one's great. I mean, he's cracked me up with his designs, but these are some bees going to the ice cream store, and they have all the flavors of the favorite plants that they like. But but bringing these bee stories to life is just part of the beginning. Okay, so this is how we start off the quarter. Then we start showing off what's really interesting biologically about these bees. So for example, with the megachile bees, they cut little semicircles out of leaves. They make the homes for their offspring, their young, with these cut leaves and petals. So what if we made a megachile base where they could live in the holes, and then the top was a sculptural element which shows off how they cut the leaves? What an amazing botanic garden contribution that would be, okay? What about if we could learn about being a xylocopa, a carpenter bee, by playing in a log that mimicked their nest? That would be fun, at least for kids. What if we had a silhouette of a megachile bee and it had holes in the side, and we could put that sculptural artistic element on a fence or the side of a building, and we could watch those bees go in and out all day foraging for their young? What a fun thing to watch. And it's a big sculptural element which helps to show how it functions, who it's for. What if we looked at how Deodasia lives underground with a semi-underground viewing place? You get to experience how Deodasia goes into the ground. It would be very neat. What if we designed for contrasting bees? There are such a big variety of bees. How can we show people that they live differently? Could we make a sculpture that compares that honeycomb of those, quote, weird European honeybees with the native bees' tunnels? Many of them live in empty sticks and stuff like that too, okay? Hollow stems. What if we made a sculpture that celebrated the materials that these native bees use? How fun would it be to come across something like this in an ecological garden, or, you know, your bee garden, okay? We have carpenter bee on the left, we have Andrina, who lives in the ground, on the right. What if we created a network for bees by spreading the seeds that they need? What if we were able to utilize those backyards, those front yards? That's my pollinator seed library on the top there if you want to join. I also dare them to retrofit places that are currently not like aiding to bees. So for example, they had to retrofit a yard of their choice, okay? Again, 3 days to do this. They did an amazing job for 3 days. So this one shows the off-ramp and slope, making it more bee friendly. This one shows a side garden, front yard, and they put in a neat feature with a seat wall with the nesting holes for bees. I thought that one was very nice to look at. Okay, then I thought, okay, how could we engage users by visiting a landscape? And so there's this idea, for example, this one, I mean, we would have to test it more, but this student had the idea of honing in on the pitches that the bees make, the noises of the vibrations, and using that to demonstrate which bees it would be on a screen, or adding some type of feedback audio. So that one's like in the very, you know, it's a 3-day idea, right? But very interesting. Okay, this one had a fun idea. So bees see in more like blue light than what we can see, okay? And so the idea is that you could put on goggles and you could almost, you could walk through the landscape kind of like with a black light. I don't know if you've ever gone out in your garden with a black light, but it's fun. And things look a lot different, and you can kind of, you know, try to see like them. It's like, you can't really, but it's trying to. That would be fun. Or what if you could open an app and you could point it at flowers and you could see what the flowers look like to bees? That'd be cool. There's the ranges, by the way, up there on the right. You can see humans can see more red than bees, and bees can see more of the purple and blue. Okay, what if instead of thinking about singular gardens, if we start looking at the landscape around us in terms of the network that it provides, habitat network? So this student worked with Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, looked at a neighborhood in SLO. You can see the Cool Cat Cafe is up there. This one worked in Mill Valley, he's over there, and he was looking at Megachile bees and how that would work in his neighborhood. I think he missed out a little bit on the backyard opportunity, but I liked his mapping style, so I put it in there. What if we took a look at how Bombus looks at the natural areas and the parks within those osos? Again, I think this one missed out on the backyard, but they got better over time. How does Anthophora look at our landscape? What are their values? Xylocopa, Halictus, and they all have different ranges too, how far they can travel. This one started to consider the backyards, which I think is important. This year they got more, I've had different rounds of this class. This year they're getting more into it. So this is Bombus looking at backyards. Xylocopa in downtown Oakland, such a heavy paved place. Bombus on campus. Integrating, this was a project about integrating bee habitat on campus where it would be added. And I think there's a place next to the Arboretum, which I would love to do that, but we'll see. Other projects, roof gardens for bees. That's another way we could integrate them. Some people got really into it. Can you imagine having a giant bee sculpture? But this one actually has like a mural about the life cycle too, which was interesting. Okay, there's another class. So this is one of my favorite projects. So I'll spend a little time on this. For this project, what I had is I have the students, I want them to think from the perspective or the value set of the bee. So I have them do kind of a hokey project where they start designing a set of glasses that in some way resembles their bee or matches it in some way. And then they have to look at a landscape and analyze it from the bee's point of view, from the bee's values. So for example, Lika did a great job here showing that if you look at this cute little house, there are these particular plants which Xylocopa likes, and the rest of it is not very useful. Okay, let's take a look. I have a few different students with this because it's about my favorite project now. Megachile, again, Andrew created these glasses that actually mimics the nesting house of the bee. And then he has this view of this nice landscape up here. Pepinapis, they are all about squash. So if you were this bee and you were at this farm, you would love those 3 green rows and everything else not so much. Chad made this project for Pepinapis, which is a little different. He covered a whole rooftop in plants that they like. So this is a lot of area. If you're an osmia bee, boy, do you love almonds. You love orchards. This is your place to be in February, March when those almonds are blooming. Melissoides, beautiful blue eyes. Look at those. She actually kind of got ahead of herself for the plan. Okay, osmia, looking at the farm from above. I love how this one got the osmia, the blue metallic, and then the white hairs. What if you're an urban beescape and you have these plantings going down the road, the median? It adds a lot to the otherwise completely gray and hostile habitat. This little house is really cute, but according to Xylocopa, we like 3 or 4 plants in the front. Desert bee has specific things that it likes, very particular, and she found a picture that has all of them, which is neat. If you were this Megachile, you can see that this front yard, typical kind of, it's a nice looking front yard and SLO, really doesn't have very much in terms of foraging for Megachile. Then we have a big, this was one of the big projects that they did. They actually had to design like actual habitat for the bees in addition to trying to transmit information about it. So the student did Bombus on campus. This is kind of what I was expecting from them. But oh my gosh, these students are amazing. So we have this other student who did urban swarm. It's a very urbanized development that he's an architecture student that he was using for a different class, but he was able to landscape the whole thing for his bees as well. I had a student who was from Hawaii, and we ended up discovering that he lived close to where there's what's called a red listed bee, which means that they are probably threatened, but there isn't many bees listed for that. Anyway, that's the whole thing. Anyway, we found out that that bee should probably have some habitat close to a botanic garden there. And we looked into all of it. It was an amazing project. Okay, here's a project straight out of Los Osos. Mariella is an amazing student. She works at Los Osos Valley Plant Nursery, which is like an amazing place. But she designed a pollinator bed for them. We shall see. I love her artwork. Then I had another student. So she lived in Glendale, which is very urbanized, and she did this project. She painstakingly went through and highlighted all of the vegetation with green. So she did a really great job with the networking diagram. She considered the phenology, all of the surroundings around the site. Then we had another final project where they actually had to zoom out from whatever site they were working on and work on the greater areas. So this is Mariella's take on in the Los Osos Valley Nursery, the surrounding area around it as well. I had Lika did a project on the Cal Poly campus, and she actually did a series of garden designs to go along with the green roof, which she had designed for the landscape architecture building. This is probably my favorite project from the whole class, and so far. We'll see how this year's students do. Max did an amazing job. He took a look at the whole SLO area. He zoomed in on downtown where there's the most kind of built up urbanization, and came up with plans on how to offset the pavement and the roads and the human infrastructure, which covers what used to be plants. And so he came up with this plan here where, like, for example, on major streets, you could do more of like a street trees approach. Whereas if you have slim, narrow planters, you could try to put those along each one. So he came up with a plan here. It says pollinator pockets. So he came up with, he says, a three-pronged approach for dealing with various typical landscape types and how to weave in pollinators back into the urban fabric. Okay, I did have another class this quarter, just so you know. I do teach a class that's other than about bees, so I just thought you might want to know. They tried to tackle doing a freeway overpass. This one scales a little off, but I think they did a great job. Just in case anyone wants to get involved in a project like this, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I had two students work with deer, turned out amazing, gray fox, badgers, and then they were really talented at making topography model out of cardboard as well. If you're interested in pollinators, if this has been interesting to you, these are my favorite books that I suggest, especially the top two there. Attracting Native Pollinators by the Xerxes Society came out in 2011. It is still, I think, the top book. It's amazing. And then the one right below it, California Bees and Blooms, really helped, was the other one that really helped for my research. So when we built these matrices about which bees use which plants, it was mostly from those two books. Both excellent. They're both tailored to things that are appropriate for California. I would say the Xerxes Society one tends to lean more on native plants, and the California Bees and Blooms one also incorporates horticultural plants. And I think that's from how they collected their data. Okay, that's the differences that are. Yeah, so just in case, when this quarter ends, I don't have any classes to teach in March. So if anyone is looking for someone to do a project, I'm still looking for employment. And if you're from SLO, I put in my application for the planning position. I would appreciate if you just give it the okay. If you'd like to teach, if you'd like to join any classes that I teach at Cal Poly, this is what I've taught so far. Maybe I will teach others, but that is a whole list. So that is it for tonight.
Kim, that was so inspiring and wonderful. There's so much chatter going on over here with excitement about all of those projects. If you want to stop sharing your screen,
Oh yeah.
since we're in a meeting as opposed to a webinar, it'll bring us up. Oh, there it goes. I think maybe it was just delayed. So we've got the grid here, and we do entertain like a fairly open Q&A. So anybody who does have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, or maybe like we'll do the raise your hand so we're not talking over each other if you did want to just speak up and ask your own question. But please, warm applause, Zoom style. That was so wonderful. I think those projects were amazing, and they should be turned into some real world projects.
I hope they can. Yeah, they really did a good job. So
yeah. And it's so, I'll just, as we wait for some questions to come in, I'll share like a little bit of my bias. I started my undergraduate career as an architecture major and made my way into, you know, botany and ecology, and now conservation, direct conservation work. And I just think it's so wonderful to be exposing people in that major who otherwise maybe wouldn't be getting this forced ecology perspective, for lack of a better way to put it, that they're getting it, right? Because they're designing our urban and suburban spaces. And I just think it's so important. So thank you for being on the forefront of that. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been super fun. Like I have to say, I came up with all these ideas while I was doing the dissertation, and then to be able to like test them out on my, you know, victims, no, students. It's been really fun. And it's, you know, I had a certain imagination about it, but to see where they can take it. I mean, they are creative individuals. They are good at working with graphics and stuff like that. Like it's been really fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Cindy, I'm just going to read what you just posted because I think it's awesome. She was saying that during Pollinator Week, she was posting about bees, I assume from your own garden or direct observations on the Nextdoor app, and it encouraged her neighbors to be more interested in it. So there's just so many avenues and so many disciplines that should and need to come together. You know,
it's neat, the technology too. Like when I posted the seed library on Nextdoor, there was so much attention from it. Like people were super curious about it, and like I give away hundreds of seed packets a month, so they're going somewhere. I'm curious about how much of an impact it can make. There was one guy I ran into the other day. I was like, "Hey, thanks for taking them," and he goes, "Every time I walk, I sprinkle them somewhere." And I was like, "That's right." You know, so you can imagine the neighborhood kind of getting transformed a little bit. So
right. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well,
I haven't seen all the chat things here. I feel like I should pour over it.
Yeah, you can pull it open.
There is one comment about what about the book Our Native Bees by Paige Embry, Timber Press. Our Native Bees? Sharon Lovejoy made a comment to that effect. Have you heard of that book?
No, I have a bunch of books, but I don't have that one, I don't think. Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, lots of good book recommendations coming in tonight.
Yeah.
A little bonus of the talk this evening.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I do have that one. Sorry.
Nice.
Not one of my favorites, but it's neat. Yeah.
Well, so I have a question. I mean, just maybe, I live in Los Osos, and I was out walking the trails sort of up behind my house, and I assumed I saw these little holes in the ground with little, like somebody had sort of dug in and sort of thrown the sand out. I mean, I'm assuming those are like ground burrowing bees. I mean,
there's
any ideas?
Whole bunch of invertebrates that it could be. The bee holes tend to look like the diameter of like a pencil.
Yeah,
like
that's about
the pencil in the ground.
Yep, yeah, exactly the right size.
You can just sit and watch and see what happens, or you can put like a clear glass or a cup over it and just watch. And eventually, whoever it is will come up, and you can see who it is. In the glass. Yeah.
Okay.
So, kind of a fun thing to do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Melissa, Cindy is hypothesizing mining wasps for you.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks,
Oh.
Cindy.
Yeah, there's so Bembix.
Yeah, that's what she's saying, Bembix,
Yeah.
in the chat.
They are
Bembix
really
wasp.
common. Like, it was funny with my son and playground sand. They they commonly lived in that in Davis. So it was interesting. And they're not
Huh.
like aggressive, but there wasn't a lot of them, which was interesting.
Oh, interesting. I'll write that down.
Yeah. I heard of a rebranding kind of for them out of Oregon where people called them tickle bees.
I like that one.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, the Bees in Your Backyard book. It's by a husband and wife. They did that's the one from the poster that I showed in the beginning. They're an amazing team, and they have put together tons of resources online. They have amazing YouTube videos. Just great. They work in Grand Escalante, which has been a neat place for them. So, and they've done a great job, like basically categorizing and collecting everything. When that poster came out too, that was kind of the beginning of this phase in entomology where people would collect the insects. They would get like do you know those spring form kind of laundry, how do you say, cubes or a rectangle? It has like a wire on the inside and just white fabric.
Yeah.
So then they put the insect in the fridge for a bit, put it on a white paper plate, put it in there, and then they take pictures and it's kind of contained in the white. I mean, that's why in the poster, they've taken all these individual pictures and then they've combined them with Photoshop. So they're all on the same thing. But it started like kind of this whole wave of like photography of in this way. So for cheap supplies too, which is cool. One thing I should say too is when Cindy and I were talking, it was really neat when I looked at her images because her bees in Los Osos look a little different than the ones in Davis that I was looking at. And they look a little different than the ones like in Orcutt too. And like, for example, the Anthophora, for example, that she has on her picture on her website, it's very, very sand colored. It's very like blonde looking. And I imagine that it matches the sand color very well there. And it's different than, for example, on the Cal Poly campus, the one that we found there was very dark looking and it matches the soil that was there. So the local kind of differences are really interesting. And I'm curious, the more I collect, I just started making a collection this year. Last year was a little crazy. So I started making my collection this year and we'll see what I come up with. But I'm really curious to see how that compares with my Davis collection. And I have a collection from when I went to the bee course in Arizona, where those look even different too. So it's fun. Let's see.
Okay, we just got a question from Mindy. Can you recommend a key for those of us new to BID? And I'd be interested in the answer to that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one from the bee course from Arizona. So I can see if that's available online or not. Okay. It's like a binder. And the problem with bees is that they finally just got around to genetically testing who's related to who, right? So they've started doing this genetic tracing of, instead of looking at things and comparing if it's a species or not, they're actually seeing genetically how they're connected. And so phylogeny is the name of that. And so that's only recently been done with bees, which is interesting. So again, bees overlooked until after all the more charismatic animals are done. But they're rewriting the family tree a bit. So even with the key that I have, well, I'll see what I can do. Okay. But then I'll say that, yeah, there's a Brian Danforth paper that shows the whole family tree, how it should be rewritten. Okay.
So is there a bee? Did you say something about a bee course in Arizona? Or what is there a website in Arizona that you could refer people to?
Sure. Let me see what they have. It's an educational course. It's at the Southwest US Research Station. And they generally tend to cater to people who are into entomology. I just put a link in the chat.
Oh, great. Great. Perfect.
It happens annually. A lot of the people who taught it in the past have retired or since passed away, for example, 'cause they're on the older end. Like I went for like the last year that Robin Thorpe was there, which was, I'm so glad I got to be able to visit when he was still around. So, yeah, but it's a whole cast of characters. It's an amazing experience. You get to be there for 9 days in this remote research station and learn how to key out bees and go catch them and watch the experts in action. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Right.
Neat.
Right.
Cindy, let me know when we're going.
You have to apply. So you have to, yeah. And if you do that, you can try to get a letter of recommendation or, you know, get your foot
Nice.
in.
Very cool.
Let's see.
All right.
Yes. Okay. Your bees love the star thistle. I know. What's up with that? They didn't get the memo.
Right. Yeah. Asters. Any asters are a good replacement, and partially because with the yellow star thistle comment, I'm guessing here, but I think there's some validity to the fact that, you know, a lot of asters will bloom through the summer and even into the fall when there's not a lot of other nectar and pollen resources available.
Mhm.
So if you can replace your star thistles, not only with the salvias and the buckwheats that were recommended from your research, but other asters to catch that bloom period. And, you know, frankly, Helianthus annuus, which is an annual, so abundant, so abundant with the flowers all the way through the summer and well into the fall. I have them in my garden. They reseed themselves well, and they're great. But some of the bush sunflowers too, if the unwieldy annuals are too much for your garden. So
Yeah. Oh, Cindy says California Bees and Blooms is being updated. Oh, that's cool. So that's with Gordon Franke and team. And they actually, so they had 14 research sites throughout California, and one of them was in SLO. So what's neat about that book too is that the data is probably well reflecting of SLO itself. So that's cool.
yeah, very cool.
Okay, if anyone wants to start a seed library, like I can help get you started.
Yeah, Kim, maybe you should toss your email in the chat if you want to.
Yeah.
Anybody who is still here and interested can reach out.
We do have a Marty Rutherford in our chapter collects seed from native plants in her yard primarily, and she's got an extensive seed collection. Is that the kind of a seed library that you're referring to? Seed library of native plants?
Yeah, so I do native plants and also like edible things and whatever else my neighbors want to drop off in it, honestly. So it's been a really fun experience. So I started with this project where I've been buying in some seeds from Tree of Life Nursery, which has a lot of natives. And then I ended up buying a lot of coin envelopes and going nuts with it.
Yeah,
and so I just put them out there, and then people pick them up. And I try to always have a mix for pollinators, and then California poppies are super popular. My mom over the last year grew sunflowers, and now we have thousands and thousands of sunflower seeds. So I've had a bunch of those going. I don't know. And I've had my neighbors have put in things like different colored poppies, for example, like they had a more pink version of the native one, which was interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Someone had a more creamy one. I saw someone put in their like pumpkin seeds, hollyhock seeds. There was a lot more vegetables like in spring. So we'll see what happens again. I've had it up since like last time about this year, a little bit later. So, but it's been fun. I mean, people just drop stuff in and I put stuff, and sometimes there's new things, and you know, just do little updates. I have the free seed library page on Facebook or whatever, and I try to do pollinator, like I put pollinator things in there, but anybody can put anything. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, any burning last minute questions, folks? Oh, Cindy's checking in here. Common bees of Western North America. Laminated pamphlet. She's got a link in the comments chat.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, if you found a laminated pamphlet that works well for you, that's good. The other thing, so when I was in Davis, they have a whole insect museum there, which was amazing. So I was actually able to go and talk with experts. When you get really, really into the ID, it does get complicated. So they actually look at the wings of the bees and the venation to be able to tell them apart. So that's like a whole thing. For my research, we ended up going with genus level because in the field, that's what I was able to do. To be able to do that large of a distance, I had to compromise on the level of like naming accuracy, basically. Okay, so that's how it went for me, which is different than like pure entomology studies. The other, besides the actual bee library and the like hosts that are there, iNaturalist is actually amazing. And there are these, it sounds a little hokey, but on iNaturalist and Facebook identification, there are so many entomologists that hang out and are just so happy to ID insects for you. And so that was amazing. And I did learn a little through them. Specifically iNaturalist, there's a man named John Asher who is, he works among many, many collections of bees. He's one of the top experts in the whole world right now. And he just hangs out identifying bees on there. Like he's one of the ones that he identified my perdita. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's John Asher. So it's amazing. You can post other stuff too. There are so many people that I've been watching in the local areas so that even I can become more, acclimated to the plants and the other wildlife that's around here. Some people are really active in that. It's really neat, like categorizing everything they see like all the time. And that's been really helpful to me. It's been a really neat environment. So let's see, anything else? I would say to figure out which bees, what they like, watch what they're using in your garden. Some of the bees are really tiny, like even like 1/3 of an inch, maybe even 1/4 of an inch. Biggest bees are about over an inch. And just watch what they're using over the year. And you can watch when you go on a walk around your neighborhood and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
did we come to the end of the list here, Melissa?
Well, it looks
Oh.
like we just got another one posted. What kind
Yeah.
of camera? What kind of camera do you use to take these great photos?
Yeah, okay. So I had, it's a little old now. It's a Canon TI1. And now I think they're up to way up there in the numbers. I bought it from like B&H Photo back in the day. It's a DSLR camera. And then I have a really big lens on it, which is a Sigma lens, which has as broad a depth of field as I could get. And that just means that that's like the plane in which you're focusing. So when you are zooming in to these little tiny, tiny insects, you only focus on like maybe their face or maybe their
Right.
leg or maybe their abdomen because it's like slices in space. And so, yeah, you have to get a really good camera base, which is usually about $1,000. And then the lens is $1,000 as well. The people who take the best pictures have a base, I kid you not, costs like $10,000. Which
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of money, but I did have a grant in the beginning for the nice base. So yeah, nice base, DSLR base, and then Sigma lens with a long range of focus.
There is a way nowadays of taking photographs and slicing them and then merging those slices with Photoshop, but oh man, it's complicated.
It's amazing. Well,
yeah.
You know what? There's ways of doing it like how do you say, from scratch manually, and then there's now automated ways too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There's a man named Steve Buckman who started off as an entomologist, but he's really interested in film too. And he's helped develop these kind of systems and photography methods. There's a really neat film on from PBS called My Backyard of 1,000 Bees. I don't know if you guys have watched that. And it's in London, but it was also filmed. It was filmed by someone who's worked with David Attenborough and that sort of thing, filming little teeny tiny insects. And he's helped develop new lenses for actually filming these creatures. So when the pandemic set in and he was, quote, stuck in his backyard, oh no, he was able to take the whole time, and he filmed the bees that he was seeing back there, and he's found that he kind of grew attached to them and learned like their habits and what they would do. And it's a really neat film. It's free. If you want me to put it
Is it, can you just get it on PBS?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just Googled it. My garden of 1,000 bees.
Yeah,
And you
cool.
can just play it right online.
Cool.
Yeah. Here, I'll put a link for you in the, but it's
I'll
really
just
neat.
Google
Like
it.
he developed these lenses, and they look really different. I'm curious, like I've never used them. Those are his own custom creations. But his filmography is amazing. So that's a fun watch if you're really like into it. But keep in mind, his bees are different and his plants are different because he's in Europe and, you know, in London. So they look similar but different. So
Very nice. Well,
All right. Well, Kristen, are we there?
yeah, I think we're there. I share Cindy's sentiment. I'm excited for spring and bee season and wildflower season. It's going to be a good one.
yeah. I'll stay in contact like too if I'm going to do some walks or something like that. You know, once I'm done with this quarter, I'm going to go to a conference, and then I'll have a lot more time.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
would be
we can
lovely.
get a field trip in there.
It'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank
All
you so
right.
much, everyone, and Kim in
Yes.
particular. So it was a great talk tonight. I really appreciated that.
Thank
Okay.
you for inviting me.
All right. Thank you so much, Kim. All right. Everybody stay safe and stay healthy.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Have a
right.
great night.
All right.